Hey everyone, Marcus here from the Ashland Fly Shop. We're back at the Vise. It's kind of the tail end of winter steelhead season here. We've got pretty low and clear conditions, and I was at the bins in the shop a few weeks ago just kind of looking at flies in my downtime and stumbled on the Prom dress from Scott Howell. We carry them from Aquaflies now, and they're really well tied, and I was looking at the flash and the proportions and just thought it was a really cool idea. Seemed good for these bright conditions, and I started whipping up my own version of it, which is pretty much just a prom dress with a wing over the top. That's really the only variation, but we're gonna walk through. I'm gonna do it in this copper and black color combo, but there are plenty of color combos, sizes, and weights that you could do in this classic intruder type fly. So let's get it started. I have got an Aquaflies 27 millimeter return eye shank in here. This is a nice size if you're gonna do any type of body on the fly, which I'll show you what I'm doing for a body, but I have tied these all the way down to a size 20 millimeter shank, because if you just wanna have the dubbing ball and prop in there, then you can get away with it with a really short shank. But I'm gonna do a little body on this fly with some new materials that we have here in the shop. So I've got Vise 50 denier, and I'm just gonna do a clean wrap all the way from the eye to the back. And I've got an ultra rig set up, pre-rigged. Because I was thinking ahead. If you guys wanna see what this system is with the tubing and the fire line and the hook, you should watch our ultra rig video that we did a few weeks back. But basically it's just 30-pound braid material with rubber tubing to keep it protected, and then a size 2 no escape hook. I'm gonna tie it in at the back, do some nice consistent wraps up to the eye, and then duck those guys through the eye. And you can see I've got plenty of room for my tippet material. I'll flip the vise full 180, kind of pinch it down, get some good hard thread wraps right when you lock it down, and then you can start to get some space between those. And I'll clip them so that they're trim with the end of my thread here. And sometimes I super glue the body, sometimes I don't. I have never had an ultra rig set up like this that goes through the eye of the fly pull out, whether I'm caught on a snag or fishing or anything like that. So I don't feel a ton of urge to get a bunch of super glue built up on the body. I will use it a little bit as I tie down these. These are just 5/32 silver hourglass eyes, and I'll do a couple figure 8 type wraps that you can see there, and then I like to just kind of cover the top and bottom a little bit. Just a little dot of glue on the top and go through the front and the back. And I just use Zap-A-Gap with the brush applicator. That's what I've always used, and it works for me, but there's plenty of other good options out there for that. And I'll work my way to the back here. And I am just gonna blow on this Zap-A-Gap for a little bit, because I was tying one of these last night and had, even 10 minutes later when I was towards the end of the fly, had that glue still sitting there a little bit wet. So I'm back to the back of the shank here, and the body on this is a new material here at the shop. It's the first time I've used it in the last week or so, and it is sweet. It's logger tin flat braid, and it's just really, really flat kind of strands of tinsel that are braided together, and makes for really nice, clean intruder bodies on a fly like this. But you could also use it on traditionals, would be another good use. So I'm just going to pull off a little bit of this stuff and clip it off there. And you know, we carry this stuff in quite a few colors. I chose the copper. It kind of matches the color palette of what I'm doing in the fly, but there's a wide array of colors available to you. So I'm going to tie in the frayed ends first and get some nice clean thread wraps over those ends so that they're not sticking out. And I'm just going to leave a little space at the top here because the front station of this fly isn't going to take a ton of room. But to keep this flat braid nice and neat on my shank, I am going to put a little Zap-A-Gap on the top and bottom of the shank. And that makes me feel a little more comfortable about using this flat braid without any type of rib to secure it, because when it meets this Zap-A-Gap, it's just gonna basically melt onto the shank, because that Zap-A-Gap is a really strong adhesive. So that flat braid is not going anywhere. It's got nice coverage around the shank. You can see it's just, you know, it's in the name, but it's just so flat and clean looking, and I could see myself for a lot of traditional flies really gravitating towards that material. So it's cool stuff. Check it out. So at the end of the flat braid, I am going to start a dubbing loop, and I'll just close off the end of the loop there. And I'm just gonna get a little bit of dubbing wax in the loop, and then put my spinner down there. For the dubbing ball, I'm going to use Senyo's Fusion Dubbing in the flame color. You could use so many different types of dubbing in here. I do like the Fusion Dubbing because it's got really long fibers. And after I get them in a ball here, I am going to try and pick out some of those longer fibers just to give a little bit of flash coming through the underbody. So I gave it a couple good spins. Yeah, you can see it's just a really fibrous material that'll give, a lot of that's going to be kind of covered up by our prop, but it is nice to give that little bit of flash from the fish angle view, which is going to be looking at the fly from this direction. So I've got a little dubbing ball in there, and the prop is just going to be Arctic foxtail in a hot orange. You could use a couple different materials for this as well, but Arctic fox seems to be pretty good. So I'm going to grab a decent sized clump of this stuff. And I always cut my materials like that at the base. And I am not going to put this in a dubbing loop, and this is actually something I saw on a video with Travis Johnson tying this fly years ago. So I'm going to measure how long I want this Arctic fox. I'm going to switch hands, and I'm going to cut it. And then the first time I saw this, I was like, what in the heck is he doing? But you just get a couple wraps on that fox, and then you pull it around on the sides of the shank, and that's what you want it to look like. You want it to look, kind of be flattened out around the shank. And then I'm going to flip the vise 180 And I'm going to do the same thing on the underside. Biggest thing for folks who are picky about their flies is getting these two sections to be the exact same length. When you're cutting a single patch and spinning it, the nice thing about that is all those fibers are going to be the same length. And this way, you have to be a little bit cautious. And then, so you basically, you put the fox in there and you just pinch it and you work it around and you get it to get full coverage. And you want this is how you want it to look. There's no patches of dubbing showing throughout the fly. It's got a full kind of cone shape and then all that fox going forward. And what I'm going to do 1/2 thread wrap and get my thread in between my fox and my lead eyes and just get this thread in front of it. So it looks real weird. And if you were going to finish the fly like this, you would be like, what in the heck am I doing? But that's not how we're going to finish the fly. And you can't, you can bend this stuff back and kind of get some thread wraps right in front of it to keep it in position. I have seen people do this technique and even glue the base of that fox just to keep it really, really stiff. But what you're going to see is if this was spun Arctic fox and it's standing like this and it starts to get that cone shape back, it will not prop the flash that we're going to use as well. This flash is it's not, basically this is just a Flashabou fly. So it's not like a fly that's got ostrich in it where you have a little stem that is more rigid. This flash is going to need more of a prop to give it that shape that we look for in our flies. So I'm going to take, this is kind of a raggedy old pack of Flashabou of mine, but I'm going to try and get a decent amount of flash here. Clip it off. And I've found with this Flashabou that getting it wet helps quite a bit, so I've always got a cup of water next to me and I'm just going to wet it down. And I just tie it almost like a little V on top of the fly, like I was tying like a tented wing over the fly. So I'll tie in, see, it's just like arched over the fly, just like that. And I bend it back and get nice securing wraps. I'm not going to use, I was going to say I'm not going to use a ton of flash, but compared to a normal fly, this is a ton of flash. But I'm going to get another good sized clump going here on the bottom of the fly. Same thing, I'm going to pull halfway through, get my fingers wet, and just wet that stuff down. And tie. One kind of at an angle like this. And this stuff, especially if you have an older pack that's been cut at different lengths, it gets a little weird because these fibers are so thin and they're really grabby to thread. But using water, I think, is your best defense. It just helps keep all that stuff in line. And you can, great benefit of a rotary vise, you can rotate this thing around and look and see how many spots you've got Arctic fox poking out. And if you're really trying to get full coverage around the fly, you can get some extra flash in there just to fill that out, which is what I'm going to do now. I've got kind of a big spot of Arctic fox right here. And I am not worried at this point that these lengths of these flash line up, because I'm going to do some trimming. It's not critical that everything lines up, but we're just looking to get good coverage, end up with a somewhat clean space in front of that flash. All right, get rid of some of this flash. So the reason when this video comes out that it'll probably be called the prom dress, a variation on the prom dress. Right now this is basically a prom dress. You could put a little guinea hackle on it or a little bit of schlappen, and that's your prom dress. The only variation that I'm going to make is to put a wing on there. And I like the concept of having a wing over this fly, just to give it that two-tone of top and bottom. And the wing that I'm using is just holographic black Flashabou, just a pinch of it. And same thing, I'll give you the top view. I'm gonna have one that kind of angles just a little bit to my near side and fold it back over and go a little bit to my far side. And that's gonna give it nice coverage. I did the first couple that I tied, I did them where that wing went straight down the middle of the fly, and I just felt like from the side profile, it looks better to have a little bit more coverage coming down the sides of the fly. So the wing I will cut to be the exact same length on both sides. And you can choose to have that wing as long or as short as you want it. I do have it shorter than the overall length of the fly. Just a preference thing there. I am interested in getting some marabou in this fly, and I think if you were gonna put marabou or you were going to put grizzly hackles in the fly, which I'm also interested in, that this would be the place to do it, is right on top of this wing. Today I am just gonna go for the fly that I've been tying, which has the wing and then a pretty good size schlappen collar. Yeah. So right on top of the flash wing, I'm gonna put black ostrich on there, and just a few clumps. I just kind of, this stuff is smaller MFC ostrich, so I am gonna do 2 clumps of it, but I've got it wetted down there. And same thing, I'm gonna do one tilted my direction, and then I'll do another tilting on the other direction. Just gives this fly kind of a dark top and a light bottom, and I like that. This is another new material at the shop, collaring schlappen, which is from Fish Hunter, which is awesome stuff. You can see it's just shorter sections of schlappen, really webby, really great for exactly what we're going to be using it for today. And then I'm going to attach this bigger piece of schlappen here. And end up just in front of the eyes. And then I'll grab the stem, flatten these out, and just make sure that it's not catching that flash. Having it still wet helps quite a bit. I like the way that looks with the bigger slopping on there. Just gives it a different look than what a standard prom dress would be. Not better, just different. So I've got that stem tied off there. And then I'm going to do a few more figure eights through the head. And then some whip finishes. 1, 2. And then I like to use, I've been using the Loon UV black really for like the last year on all these type of flies, and really liking it. It's just got a great gloss coat to it. Now the cool thing about the prom dress, and I think Scott says this in Skagit Master 2, he's fishing one of them, and he ties them really long, and then when he's on the water, he just cuts them to the length that he feels appropriate for the fishing, which is a cool idea. You know, you could tie some really long ones if you felt like you needed it in the conditions. You could keep them that way. I am going to trim this one so that that flash comes just behind the point of the hook. And I like to tie them, you know, you see some, I've seen some in fly shops before that are just totally caked full of flash. And this is a relatively sparsely tied prom dress. And I like that. I was out fishing one this weekend, fished a couple different ones, had ones with more flash and less flash. And I felt like the ones with a little bit less, just moved so interestingly in the water. So I've got my ultra rig kind of popped out the back of the fly. I'm going to peel everything back and slide this tubing over my shank. Takes a little finagling sometimes to get that hook point to be straight in line with your eyes. But you can see I've got probably like a 4.5 inch long fly. And I'm just going to hold it in front of me. I mean, geez, you could fish it right there, but... And I do try and clip at different lengths, and I do not mind clipping, you know, higher in the body. Clipping some things here and there. I just don't like the perception that it just is a totally even taper. I like to leave some that are longer and some that are shorter. But that might clip just a little bit more. And if any side of it gets some taper to it, I kind of like to give it more bulk on top and kind of taper the belly up. So I'm going to clip these under ones a little bit more just to give it a little taper. But that is my variation on the prom dress. Let me get it a little bit closer to how it looks. But pretty sparse with the flash. You can see that propping it that way with the Arctic Fox, which I think is a totally legitimate way to prop all your steelhead flies, and I'll probably start playing around with that a little bit more. But it's got that big, you know, shouldery look with the schloppen. Plenty of movement in it. You'll see when we get it in the swim tank. And for bright conditions, copper is a great color on the Rogue. I'm excited to start tying them, you know, even smaller and see what that holds. Maybe play around with some marabou. Who knows? If I sit down, the last couple times I've sat down to tie, these have all I've been tying. So if it's like that, after another couple weeks, we'll probably come out with another variation of the prom dress. But for today, that's our variation. Thank you very much for tuning in.